Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the episode 2 of our EDocumentALK. I, along with my two dashing moderators, Jai and John, will help you through this webinar. Today, with the help of our resource speakers, we are going to discuss about the performance-based assessment. So when we say performance-based assessment, it measures the student's ability to apply the skills learned in an authentic way. This type of assessment aims to determine the student's skills regarding a particular skill. So we have here guided questions, which will be answered and tackled in this episode. First is to differentiate between the process-oriented and product-oriented performance-based assessment. Second is to differentiate between general and specific task-oriented scoring rubrics. Third is the factors that determine the use of scoring rubrics over other authentic assessment procedures. And lastly, we have to develop 5 scoring rubrics for each authentic assessment. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, Mr. Gerald J. Balanay and Mr. Ben Seraspe. Good morning, sir.
So good morning, I am Gerald. So when we talk about the performance-based assessment, it falls into two types, and we have the process-oriented and the product-oriented. So when we say process-oriented, from the word process, which means the series of steps or action taken in order to achieve a particular end. So this assessment is concerned with the actual task rather than the product itself. The teacher makes judgment based on the competencies of the students to perform the given task.
Now let us tackle the product-oriented performance base. So when you say product, it is an output from the student's skills and competencies. And this product-oriented assessment seeks to assess performance through a finalized product. It may be completed project or demonstration that should meet specific requirements. The teacher may or may not choose to engage in process that will bring about the final product. Both the process-oriented and product-oriented performance assessment, the teachers base their criteria of giving through scoring rubrics, and it can be general or a specific scoring rubrics.
Thank you, Mr. Balanay and Mr. Sebaspe. In their discussion, they mentioned about scoring rubrics. What is a rubric and how important it is? Ms. De Torres will answer this question for us.
The previous discussion, the speaker mentioned about the scoring rubrics. So, scoring rubrics is the scale used to assess a student's performance along the task specific set of criteria. So, teachers uses the rubrics as a guide to give clearer expectations to the students, encourage more objective and consistent assessment, and could provide better feedback. So in task-oriented scoring rubrics, we have two types. So, and these are the general scoring rubrics and specific scoring rubrics. So when we say general or generic rubrics, it can be used across similar performances, construct one rubric and use it for similar tasks. Sometimes the tasks are so similar that there is no reason to construct a detailed rubric for each. So, for example, we have rubrics for writing an essay or rubrics for a role play. And while task specific rubric can be used for a particular task or assignment, for example, rubrics for a project proposal or rubrics for a Red Docs laboratory experiment.
Thank you very much, Ms. De Torres. In our episode 1, we already discussed about the authentic assessment. And this assessment aims to evaluate students' abilities in real-world contexts. In other words, students learn how to apply their skills to authentic tasks and projects. Now let us tackle about the factors that determine the use of scoring rubrics over other authentic assessments, and let's us now ask the help of Mr. Vente.
The difference between the scoring rubrics among the other assessment procedure is that in using rubrics, it increases the objectivity of the assessment. Teachers use rubrics to support learning. They make assessing the students' work efficient, consistent, objective, and quick. Teachers evaluating an assignment know implicitly what makes the assignment excellent, mediocre, or in need of improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Vente. Now let us identify and describe the process of developing scoring rubrics in the product-oriented performance-based assessment with the help of Ms. Cabaluna. Ms. Cabaluna?
In developing a scoring rubrics in a product-oriented assessment, the teacher must first give a task design for the particular performance-based assessment. In the product-oriented, teachers should try to bring out the complexity, creativity, and appeal of their students' work. So the teacher will then set the criteria of what really counts in the final output. The often used major criteria are the quality, creativity, comprehensiveness, accuracy, and aesthetic. From the major criteria, the next task is to identify sub-statements that should make the major criteria more focused and objective. So this would be the process of developing scoring rubrics in a product-oriented, performance-based assessment.
Thank you, Ms. Cabaluna. Now I am going to introduce to you our special guests that would help us develop a scoring rubric for each of these authentic assessments. We have Mr. Obina, Ms. Hernando, Ms. Tiasis, Ms. Malagum, and Mr. Francisco. These are the example authentic assessments that needs scoring rubrics. First, essay on why Rizal should be the national hero. Second, oral presentation of the piece Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Third, scrapbook of EDSA Revolution. Fourth, laboratory output of frog dissection. And last, evaluating performance in argumentation and debate.
In this rubric, it falls on the persuasive essay because this tackles us to why Rizal would be a national hero. In writing, you have to consider the student's sentence structure. Is it well constructed or is it chaotic? Next is the grammar and spelling to ensure that the readers can comprehend the essay and to avoid misunderstanding. And then, the evidences and examples as to why Rizal should be a national hero. Is it because of his deeds, his works? And then, we have the capitalization and punctuation for formality.
For the oral presentation of the piece Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, I will give a general task-oriented scoring rubrics. For the first category, we have the clearness. It determines if the student is speaking clearly or just mumbles. Second is posture and eye contact. I believe this criteria is important in an oral presentation. Third, we have the attire. And lastly, the loudness of the student's voice.
And for the authentic assessment, which is a scrapbook for EDSA Revolution. This is the rubrics that I formulated. The first major criteria is the amount of information inside the scrapbook. If it have the information about the EDSA Revolution, and next is the quality of information, if it is relevant enough to the topic or not. And then the diagram and the illustration, and also I included creativity as the last criteria because after all, scrapbook making brings out the art and creativity of the students.
For the laboratory output of frog dissection, I choose three major criteria, which are the procedure, observation, and the materials. If the dissection procedure is neat and tidy, the students would have the highest score, while those who leave their post untidy and a mess would get the lowest score. In the observation, they will be graded based on their answers of their guided question. And the score for the materials will be based on the completeness of their apparatus and their lab gowns.
For the evaluation performance in argumentation and debate, it is important that the rubric should contain the criteria which assess the facts given by the students and not just arguing based on their opinions. Next is the presentation style of both the government and the opposition, including the delivery of their speakers, and I also included the rebuttal as a major criteria, and then the organization of the students' arguments.
And that sums up for the episode 2 of our Ed Document Talk. I hope you have enjoyed and learned about the process oriented and product oriented performance based assessment. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in our next episode.